Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Fiber for Breakfast. We're now in our 13th episode of 2023. But before we kick off, I'd like to thank our Wesco, our platinum sponsor of Fiber for Breakfast, and our gold sponsors, Nokia and Vetro. Today, the Fiber Broadband Association is hosting Fiber Day on the Hill in Washington, D.C. in the Rayburn building. Our goal is to set the record straight and educate members of Congress and their staff on the capabilities, performance, and necessity of fiber to close the digital equity gap for generations to come. The event features 5 interactive demonstration stations presented by FBA members that show what fiber is, how it improves the U.S. households, communities, and the economy, including facilitating 5G, precision agriculture, education, healthcare, and economic opportunities. Yesterday, President Biden kicked off the Investing in America tour in North Carolina. As part of this effort, Secretary Raimondo is visiting fiber manufacturing plants in North Carolina, so some of our members there. As part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, the administration is making high-speed internet available across the country using American-made fiber optic cable in North Carolina to get it done. You know, our next regional event is coming up quickly. This will be in a week. It's at have the Regional Fiber Connect workshop and then Train the Trainer in Oklahoma City on April 6th. You know, these workshops are incredibly popular, so please register today. And registration is also open for our Regional Fiber Connect workshop in Austin, Texas on May 16th. You know, these workshops and hotels sell out quickly, so please register for Austin. That brings us to today's Fiber Breakfast session with Ryan Kudera from Finley Engineering for a session on electric co-op broadband, why make ready matters. Before I formally introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce Trish Ehlers from our team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thanks so much, Gary, and good morning to everyone who's joined us this morning. Before I go over a few logistical items, we'd like to once again thank the platinum sponsor of Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco, and our gold sponsors, Nokia and Vetro. Now, if everyone would keep in mind that you're all in listen mode only, you can ask a question at any time in the question box located within your control panel on the right side of your screen. We'll host a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's webinar. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours. You can find the recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. At the conclusion of the presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a very brief feedback survey. We'd really appreciate it if you'd take a minute to do that. We appreciate your input. Gary, I'll pass it back to you now to introduce our panelists and get us started. Gary?
Thanks, Trish, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Fiber Breakfast, we heard from Jeff Hainan from Del Oro on fiber history in the making, based on his most recent research. To me, the shocking takeaway was on how much fiber cable companies are deploying. He also highlighted that fiber equipment spending in North America increased 19% year over year, with substantial investments in 10 gig XGS-PON. Jeff expects XGS-PON to continue to dominate the market through the end of the decade, with 25 gig PON continuing to grow and 50 gig PON, that's 50 gig PON, emerging as an option in a few years, and 100 gig PON on the foreseeable road to the future. That brings us to today's Fiber for Breakfast session with Ryan Kudera for a session on electric co-op broadband, why make ready matters. Ryan joined Finley Engineering in 2022, and prior to joining Finley, Ryan served as the broadband director for the state of Wyoming. Ryan has served many roles in telecom, broadband, and energy sectors during his 25-year career, with positions including field operations, instruction, economic development, regulation, and finance, with a continued focus on rural broadband in the Rocky Mountain West. So welcome, Ryan. And for our audience, please type in your questions to go, and we'll work those in Q&A at the end. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to Ryan.
Hey, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. It's nice to be back and going forward again. And thanks for having us. It's a good time to get out there and see the difference we can make, of course. So on the presentation today, we're taking kind of a look at the electric cooperatives and then why make ready matters. Of course, it's through Finley Engineering. Finley was established in 1953 we have electric power and communications industries. We have 6 locations. Of course, our website is www.finleyusa.com. And if you have a need, we have a solution. Next slide. I tend to take a look back. You'd mentioned the history of fiber and how that plays a role in today. I'd like to look back at the electrification and how some of the road work was laid as many as 100 years ago, and my kind of personal relationship with some of that. Here we see a picture of FDR. He's handing a pen to a gentleman in a bow tie, man from Beaver City in McCook, Nebraska, known as George Norris. Anybody that's familiar with TVA will recognize George Norris. As right there, they're signing the Muscle Shoals bill, which actually went in and provided the development for the Tennessee Valley Authority. Next one. So with the success of the TVA and the progress, President Roosevelt on May 11th, 1935 signed Executive Order number 7037, which furthered the Muscle Shoals bill. He expanded off the success with that, with this executive order. Go ahead, please. With the Rural Electrification Administration. Of course, as an executive order, he can establish the administration. From there, Norris was not happy with the progress of the administration, so he proposed a bill in 1935 that was also supported by a Texas representative, Representative Rayburn. And at that point, they got that passed through Congress and signed by President Roosevelt in May 20 of 1936, making something that still exists today off the Rural Electrification Act. The Rural Electrification Act, of course, is part of the Rural Utility Service underneath USDA. There's a lot of bits and pieces and parts, but this is the generality where it got started. So this here really made a boom back in the day of electrifying the rural parts of the country. And I would make a note, there's parts of Nebraska, and again, being from McCook as well, they didn't see electricity sometime into the 50s and 60s. So it really made a difference, but it took a long time to actually reach the depths and the spans of rural America. Okay, next slide. And here is just because of that act and how it rolled forward, and it is allowed to borrow low interest loans, et cetera, and create the electric cooperatives that so many of us are members of. And the one thing that they really didn't intend on was the economic development. I mean, they went in 1933 with electrification, put it across farms and ranches across the country to work smarter. You know, now you had pressurized wells. You didn't have to didn't have a pump jack in the house. You eventually came refrigeration. Suddenly you didn't have to milk the cow by hand. You had a device to do it. It's that, in separator, same way. And then one thing we all don't think of, and I know I sure don't, electric fans. You know, imagine summertime in Texas with just the windows open, hoping for a breeze. You know, made a huge change in lives. And one note, it's 1933. So we think back to how things worked back there, and everything was built on a handshake. And of course, we build things a little different today as well, as you can tell, leaning ladders on the side of gen pole trucks, et cetera, just making it work to now linemen working out of the helicopter. So then you fast forward to 2023, and now the broadband build out. You have the, yeah, go ahead and go back one, sorry. Now, instead of just learning to work smarter and different advantages in the electrification field, now we're adding working, learning, health, stock trading, video watching, game playing, and then we add the rural piece of this, the ag internet of things. You can monitor so many things because of broadband anymore. You can check on grain bins from your phone. You can watch your irrigation from your phone. You can time your commodity markets to where you're looking for a higher level of profitability. Remote livestock options, again, all in the point of working smarter. One noted difference is now the cost of the handshake. Go to the next slide, please. So now we get into the point of why Make Ready matters. So the cooperatives and how they've been involved with the building of rural America since 1933 and all through the past 100 years, they've seen a significant amount of generational change. You know, they were key in the generational change in the 30s and electrification of America. And here they're being called on again to do the same with broadband. And what I like to point out is some may think this is a new idea, but traditionally communication companies and energy companies have worked hand in hand for many decades because it was the telephone poles that were first around, and then electricity came, and they decided, oh, let's try and put electricity on phone poles. Any good lineman will know you don't really successfully put high energy lines on top of a class 10 pole. But with the generational changes, the primary objective, of course, of our cooperatives remains the same. Their initial objective is keep the lights on. You know, that's why they were formed. That's why they operate. And they each have a different broadband tolerance, whether they decide to just tolerate broadband and cooperate with communications companies like they always have, or the new game deciding to participate. And now the electric cooperatives have the opportunity to go in and participate in the broadband boom. And, you know, many are still on the fence. I believe there's a report out there from NRECA that there's over 200 co-ops that have already started participating in the broadband field with a total, I think their membership was in the 900 range. So less than a third of our cooperatives are actively participating. So that either means the other 2/3 are tolerant or still thinking about it. So that moves on to economic development. We all know as things change, you know, there's studies and studies. My alma mater tech school has really joined forces with other colleges in Western Kansas because they see in the future there's not as many people living in the rural parts of America because, well, one, you know, automation. There's a lot of reasons, but they can help economic development. One of the largest, I saw a report today from some newspaper here in Wyoming that Wyoming is actually home to the leading homesteader YouTube person out in, I believe it's in Platte County. Again, you know, over several 100,000 followers, etc. I mean, amazing things in the rural reaches of Wyoming. You know, same thing here. I'm coming from a town of 300. Worked remotely here. Worked for the state, done a lot of things, and honestly haven't left my house. You know. So anyway, the whole point is it adds a lot of economic development to very small communities, and then ultimately member and owner relations. You know, it improves and changes member-owner relations and continues showing the member owners that they're the success of the cooperative. And some of the success stories that I've been directly involved in and have seen around me, and one shocking one, the Western Slope, Colorado. There's not a lot of people around that know that the Western Slope of Colorado from southwest to northwest is actually fed by a large co-op. Most of the backbone in that area is on cooperative network. So it's very, very vital to a large swath of Western Colorado. And then the other one, and that's a case of being, you know, broadband tolerant or supportive. The other one is Moffat and Round counties. It's my cooperative. My cooperative has gone through Northwest Colorado and has deployed fiber across 3 counties. There's only 2 listed there, but they're offering gig over gig at very good rates and have invested money, have received state and federal grants to do so, and have decided to participate directly. And then the one I like to reference in this picture is Teton County, Wyoming. If you look at the picture there, it's not necessarily forgiving terrain for plowing cable in the ground, and they wanted connectivity. So what did they do? They came off of a power line to feed a remote cab. It's just further demonstrates the cooperation between the electric co-ops and electric industry and the communications. Next slide, please. So what's the, when we talk about make ready, we want to talk about making the make ready. So, what does it take to have make ready done? First steps would be getting the pole inventory, knowing the attachments, who your attachers are, pole tagging, mid-span, taking a look at the mid-span. When's the last time that was measured? Pole loading analysis. The picture up in the upper left is deflection of a pole. You hope not to see it that far, or if it does, you hope it's still standing when it's done. But it also, the pole loading analysis like this out here in the western reaches of Wyoming, we get pretty horrific snows and you get 90-mile-an-hour straight line winds. So you start stringing an additional cable for 40 miles on a pole line, we need to understand if it's going to stand up and snap back or snap off at that point. Then attachment management. It's almost interesting to know how few attachers or attachments are actually known or being paid for or inventory. So you need to go through on attachment management. You need to verify who is attaching, who can attach, where they're attaching, height-wise, required, and if there's any changes that need to be made. Is there abandoned cables that need to be taken down? And again, a lot of things exist out there that may or may not be working and may or may not be part of the agreement. And then easement management. Again, right-of-way verification. Well, do you have right-of-way? Is the right-of-way only good for electric? Can you put broadband on it? That's a big sticking point out in the West. Have a lot of right-of-way that they can put power on, but that's it. Can't put anything else on, and it just creates a long, lengthy process, sometimes very costly for a lot of folks. And then make ready reporting. Okay, get a cost analysis. A lot of the grants and stuff require estimates. That's a big unknown. You know how much it costs to hang cable and run line and all that, but if you don't know, you could go from a 15% make ready budget to a 65% make ready budget by just looking at your poles and realizing that, okay, the project was viable, now maybe not so much. And then make ready helps get that cost analysis placed. And also, even for existing attachments, you get pole replacements reports. Like this pole in the picture here on the right has a red tag around. That would be a maintenance. That would be on the electric company. Where if somebody else was looking to hang a 288 from this very busy pole, that might be looking on them. That's a whole nother topic, and we could spend 2 hours on that. But just some high level stuff there. Next slide. And then here again, how the make ready matters to the cooperative. On the cooperative side, it gives a clear definition of the broadband requirements and the options. Okay, it lets you get a defined cost, lets you understand what it's really going to take, and then the options the cooperative could have. Will help clarify some easement situations. May not be comfortable, but at least get through that clarification process. The attacher inventory, whose attachments, what heights, what issues they're existing out, and then who knows? You haven't looked at your attachers for 20 years. The cable company or the telephone company may just be like, oh, hey, yeah, we need to go over here. We'll just string it on these poles, and suddenly you got 5, 10, 20 miles of additional cable that you had no idea was there. And that changes things as well. And then finally, broadband decision making. Is this something that with the right grant, with the right finance opportunities that a cooperative does want to get entered into? Because if you look at historically who the cooperatives serve, it's the low return. Everything I heard at the state was ROI, and ROI is a big thing. And not only on builds, but ROI long-term, maintenance. In fact, I know there were some builds that we placed out in grants that wouldn't return over time. So that's, that's important. It's great that it's built and doesn't cost anybody much or even with the match, but ultimately if it lives in the red, it's a problem. Again, ease in reporting. As states become more aware of attachers and pole lines, there's been states that have gone in and said, hey, you have to make your attachment rates $1. Hey, you have to let other people attach. The states are becoming more involved, asking for more information, and the Make Ready is going to help you do that. It'll help you report, let everybody know what is available, what isn't available, and what could or couldn't be built. And then finally, attachment request requirements. There is some out there that there's exemptions, and there's a whole litany of things as well. But there are attachment request requirements that are out there as well. That some companies may have to meet, some don't. But that's up to you guys. But it is out there. And then finally, the community. You're always. I've had folks tell me that you can't, as a manager or somebody at a co-op, you can't get away. You go to the coffee shop, and if you're not doing a good job, you're going to hear about it. And that's where it comes out here, is exemplifies the cooperative support for your community. No different than our representative on our board here. I drink coffee with her about twice a week. And sometimes we talk about electric, most of the time we don't, but if there's a topic, nobody's bashful to bring it up. So it really helps the community to understand that, yeah, hey, we're looking at it, and no, we can't afford to get in it, but we can support it. And then finally, the commitment to the people and places it serves. By having a defined kind of broadband plan for your cooperative, it can really help you put it out there. It's like, yes, we are absolutely supportive of this, and this is where we're at. We may change our mind someday, but right now, anybody that wants to come in, we'll help them the best we can without damaging the health and progress of the cooperative. Next slide, please. So with that, it kind of brings us on where to get started. And that's where Finley Engineering can come in and help you out. We have a whole list of stuff there, market analysis, kind of everything we've gone through. I won't go through the list. But yeah, feel free to reach out and ask a bunch of questions, and I'd be more than happy to ask. And if I don't know, we've got some very smart folks here at Finley that can help you out. Next slide. And that would be the, then feel free to reach out. That's my email address. You can get a hold of me anytime.
Ryan, really interesting. So you're saying that over 200, what is there, about 900 electric co-ops in the nation?
Correct.
And so it's a little over 200 that are deploying broadband today. Why wouldn't every electric co-op deploy broadband?
Well, it's really kind of interesting right now, is I think it has a lot to do, it has a lot to do with investment. And going back to that key performance for the cooperatives, it's keeping the lights on. That's all they've done for 70 years, 80 years. And they're very conservative. I've met a lot of my REA folks here in Wyoming, and it's very conservative, and broadband's very new, very cutting edge. So and honestly, some of the early adopters in the cooperatives weren't necessarily the most successful. So there's a lot of that memory, a lot of that history there that really makes them a little edgy to enter the market, for one. For two, sometimes it just doesn't, with the grants and the different regulations because we know that 25.3 was a speed, now we're at 100/20 or 100/100, depending on the grant opportunities and the availability. There just wasn't a lot of opportunity in the higher return areas or in town. So a lot of them would opt out for that as well. I think that's changing, and we're starting to see that change more and more in the cooperative space because of the different dynamics in the markets. I know we do talk to some of them out here in Wyoming. Wyoming currently doesn't have a cooperative that has entered the broadband space because of it, but what we do have is a lot more regional carriers here, so it kind of changes the market opportunities for folks.
So is Finley or anybody that you know of working with the cooperatives in Wyoming and out west to take advantage of some BEAD money to be able to get into the broadband business?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, my cooperative here out of Steamboat Springs, Colorado, we actually Finley helps support them in their builds and the federal grants and state grants that they've received to build out there as well. We have opportunities in New Mexico, other opportunities around the Rocky Mountain West that we've been working on as well.
So I know it's going to vary widely, but what would you say a typical meters per mile on an electric co-op?
That I wish I could answer a little closer. Well, let's just put it this way: some of the reaches of that the cooperative that I know of went into, the population base is like 0.3 per square mile. Is some of the density that we're looking at. I mean, basically, there's one house in a 5-mile area with a small family. So to say, I'm not sure what the meter density would be exactly.
But is there, from your work on this, is there a certain density where it doesn't make sense? Or, I mean, I would think that the cooperatives, I mean, they're in the business to serve the unserved. I mean, that's from 1933, right? That's the business they're in, and to serve these communities. And for every reason that these communities need power, they all need broadband. So is it all aerial, or do they have any buried in the cooperative land?
Honestly, most everything I've dealt with is aerial, unless there's some demand or a crossing or something that they have to go buried, but they'll hang it all. And then if the cooperative is actually hanging, there's a slide in there too showing the energized space and the communication space. The nice thing about the cooperative doing their own work is they could actually hang up in the energized space and get above any other potential conflicts down the side.
Well, when I work with IOUs or public utilities, they have a ton of dark fiber. You know, they're connecting substations with fiber, and just have a very fiber-rich network. Don't you need to connect substations with fiber? I mean, isn't there some dark fiber that's being deployed?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot. It's actually surprising how much dark fiber there is in the transmission world. You get into the higher capacity 500 kV, the 230 lines. You get anything above, definitely 230 and above. You've got the large static wires, and we were placing 500-600 fiber static wires, OPGW, and might only use 24 for, like you say, a lot of the grid controls and different comms and AMI specs. And it wasn't until probably the past, I don't know, 20, 30 years that they realized, well, wait a minute, we could sell some of that dark fiber. But even at that, it gets to be a little sticky on right-of-ways and other items, is most of the right-of-way will allow for electrical operations, which would include AMI and grid control. But what would really miss out was when you start retailing that or commercializing that, and then that makes a difference on your right-of-way. Not that it can't be changed, but again, that's when that's when people that get paid a lot more than I do get involved and they hash it out. So,
some of the audience questions are lead times to establish make-ready cost and timelines regulated?
Lead times, costs, yeah, none of that's regulated at this point.
So just best effort by each co-op.
Yeah. Yep. The only thing
that
would be, oops, sorry.
Well, the pole attach rates, are those set by the FCC or any regulated body, or is it each co-op has their own pole attachment rates?
It's my understanding that right now everybody sets their own rates. Now, I can't remember what state was it. It's a southern, I think, want to say Georgia, but don't quote me on that for sure. But there is a state that passed, might have been North Carolina, that passed $1 a pole, and basically, the charge was going to be $1 a pole, and the state was going to step in with some funding for the difference. Was the last I'd researched that, but it's been well over a couple years since I've looked into that.
Yeah, that was had to do with while there was unserved, until that they were able to serve those communities, that the PUC had stepped in. So they've been I've heard both sides of that argument. Oh, what about, is there, one of the questions came in is there a standardized pole attachment agreement that can be used for these build outs between utility company and broadband provider?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a boilerplate out there, but generally each co-op will have their own that's gone through their legal and whatnot. So yeah, it's going to be more customary, but if there's parts of it, by all means, you can ask to negotiate your way through that.
Well, Ryan, we really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your insights with our audience today. And I want to thank our audience for joining us today. And we're going to get back together next Wednesday. We're going to be discussing the digital equity gap across the U.S. with Angela Ty Bennett, NTIA's Digital Equity Director. So you're not going to want to miss that. We'll see you next Wednesday. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.